For the first time since Wonder Woman 1, Warner Brothers has come out with a superhero movie that not only has a coherent story, but is also very stylistically interesting. The problem is, it's completely tone deaf. Hey everyone, Yan Zhao here. Long time no see. The Suicide Squad, not to be confused with Suicide Squad. 2016, Warner Brothers released a steaming turd into the world. That was Suicide Squad, which luckily for them was somewhat drowned out by the Rio Olympics. Not the best Olympics. That movie was on the heels of another stinker called Batman v Superman, and later we got Joss Whedon's The Justice League. All horrible movies. Since then, we've also had some bad movies. Joker, which originally wasn't written to be a Joker vehicle, but hey, DC needed some cash, so fine, they made a Joker. Then we had Wonder Woman 1984, which I have to ask, how in God's name did the same woman write and direct both movies? It's like, one, she was maybe doing well, but then for the second one, she had descended into like a cocaine-fueled spiral where one day she just wasn't aware of what's going on anymore. The director of the original Suicide Squad declined to come back for another one due to creative differences with the studio. The original Suicide Squad is a very sad tale of too many fingers in somebody else's pot. The studio gave note after note after note and forced many changes on the director to make the movie just completely incomprehensible mess. Even the famed Will Smith, the Fresh Prince of everything, couldn't save that flick. 2021's The Suicide Squad, James Gunn came over to direct. Now he got in a little bit of trouble for previously on Twitter making a lot of jokes about doing naughty things with kids around 10. So he was canceled from Marvel for a while. But what happens when you make the over $1 billion grossing Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and Guardians of the Galaxy 2? You get to do whatever you want at Warner Brothers. And this is what he chose to do. James Gunn, in and of himself, is a fantastic director. Anything that he directs really makes sense. It has a flavor of its own, a style of its own. However, I think, like most of the Marvel movies, this is a bit of fruit that's been sitting out too long and it's starting to rot. The Marvel Cinematic Universe originally started as a bunch of very diverse movies. Each movie had its own style. If you go back and watch Iron Man 1, it's amazing how gritty it is and almost grim from 2008. Compare this to what happens after Guardians of the Galaxy. Every movie becomes sort of jokey, half serious. We can see that trend continuing all the way through the end of Endgame. But it doesn't stop there. Earlier this year, Black Widow came out. And what did we see? Kind of jokey, kind of serious. That movie tried to take its cues from The Winter Soldier, possibly the best of the original MCU movies. And even then, they had to add in so many jokes. Oh, you're doing 3-point landing with arm in air. Oh, it's so silly. Yeah, okay, that's great. And this stylistic change is all due to Guardians of the Galaxy, done by James Gunn. So what we have in The Suicide Squad is a movie that should be kind of a joke. What you have are a bunch of B, C, or D list supervillains from the DC universe that are in jail, and in exchange for getting time off their sentences, they go on these impossible missions where nobody really cares if they die. Now, one thing James Gunn is great at is bringing in A-level talent. So, for example, he brings in Idris Elba as sort of the replacement Will Smith. Replacement probably because Will Smith has FU money and was like, nah, not again. You also have Viola Davis reprising her character from How to Get Away with Murder as a stern bitch who will do anything to get ahead. And you have John Cena as Peacemaker, a roided up man who is super awesome at shooting things. Probably appropriately, he ends up turning to a heel, which is very similar to real life John Cena, the man who can't admit Taiwan's a country. One of the lowlights of this film is that Pete Davidson is in it at all. Thankfully, he'll be dead within about 10 minutes. It still doesn't make up for me having to look at him, though. So as you can tell by the title, I wasn't that big a fan of this movie. It was competently written, it was competently directed, but it misses the tone. Now, what do I mean by that? We are in a very interesting time, my friends. We have global disease. We have crashing economies. We have polarization like never before. This is a time where you need a Richard Donner type Superman. Or perhaps X-Men 1. Something that sort of brings us all together. This, on the other hand, misses the mark. You have many scenes where, yes, these are villains, but they're acting in the place of our superhero protagonists. Nobody acts honorably. There's one scene early on where they're invading this island and they go through and kill a camp of people who turn out to be rebel freedom fighters. And the answer to that is, whoops. And the rebel leader's like, well, gosh, I guess I have to work with you guys now. You kind of see that progressing through it. There's a real ambiguity, really not understanding that villainous people should be villainous, but it should be called out as villainy. You can have sympathy for these characters, and they're all well written. They all have their own arc. But, there's a guy with polka dots who becomes a superhero, but he can only kill things by imagining everything is his mother. That's pretty creepy. And one of the biggest sins is the continued presence of female wish fulfillment character Harley Quinn. Now, I'm sure Margot Robbie is a lovely woman who is a great actress and, rescues puppies from fires in her free time or whatever. But the character of Harley Quinn is just like a tack on. It's really almost 100% separate from the main story. And it's like, well, we have this character, we have her under contract, and for some reason the studio thinks that people actually give a rat's behind about Harley Quinn. Speaking of which, there was a lady who controls rats, and her character was way better than Harley. The problem with Harley is she just randomly murders things, no sense of consciousness, no one's calling her out on it. So there are plenty of people who go on better rants about Harley Quinn. Check out James Finney's channel if you get a chance to. But in terms of Suicide Squad, was it a bad movie? Nah, not really bad. I mean, it was well done, well acted, except for Pete Davidson. And it's better than a lot of the schlock that's been out recently, but overall, it's just not a movie that people want to see. People need something inspiring. Star Wars came out in a similar time of malaise in the US, and it became the greatest selling movie of all time until Titanic or Avatar, one of those two. Why? Because it was full of hope. It was full of people choosing to do the right things for the right reasons. Characters are moral. Even characters who are morally questionable, like Han Solo, he eventually chooses to do the right thing. And this is really what Suicide Squad needed. Yeah, Idris Elba's character sort of has a face turn where he's doing the right thing, a sort of ham fist that his daughter that he didn't care about before and never saw, was going to be put in jail, and so he's doing the right thing for her, and maybe they're helping out the people at the end, but it's just not very convincing as they murder their way through a small island nation. That is what it is. So what did you think of the movie? Leave your comment down below, and I will be back soon with more movies, D&D, and comic reviews.